Good morning, everybody. It's Marty, the JavaScript party, and my buddy Rhett. And here is a nut. Go girl. I cracked it pretty good, so but she can't. It's a walnut, so she can't really break those. Her beak's not really big enough to break those on her own. But I put a pretty big crack in it, so that should be a good bit of work. So we are working on unit tests. Basically, what was the deal? So I was trying to delete stuff, and I found out, or I was trying to do update, and then I found out that I had some sort of issue with. Oh yeah, that's right. I was trying to figure out. So what happened basically is, I when you add the viz, and and I started working on update, and so when you go over here and you hit update, you get this visualization, and you see that we have ID number one. And so the idea was that, okay, so if I go here and then I hit delete, so my full intention was to recycle IDs, but I found out that basically when I hit update, now I have update number 12, ID 12 instead of ID 1, even though I've deleted everything. So that sort of led me down this path of trying to figure out memory and stuff like that. And then in that process, I found this sort of concept here, that I was unaware of, called detached elements. So if you take a snapshot, you could see that I have like 25 detached TRs. Now, I got to figure that out. And what's weird is, like, I think in like 3 days ago, when I was trying to do this exact same testing, I did not have these TRs. Or so I have one TR that has 25 nodes inside of it that is detached. And what detached means is that the browser has this thing sitting in memory, but JavaScript cannot access it. So, and I think another way of saying that would be that the JavaScript created this, and for some reason, through some process, somehow it ended up deleting its reference to it in the browser, but the browser still has a reference. And for some reason, the browser doesn't clean these up. And maybe one day, the browsers will, if the browser can, if it can figure this out, that there's detached nodes, then, and it can figure out whether a node is visible or not, then it should be able to figure out that it should delete them. Like, we shouldn't have detached nodes. But anyway, so that's the sort of rabbit hole that I'm down right now. And so I made some changes because I actually had other detached nodes as well. So I made some changes to fix those, and it caused some sort of some rewrites and re-architectures to accomplish that. And so now I'm trying to clean that up. I'm trying to, so now I'm trying to get the unit tests back up to 100% test coverage. And then after that, I'm going to just run through my end-to-end tests and make sure that the end-to-end tests still work. So I can run my unit tests. All I have to do is type in npm run test. And the reason I can do that is because inside of my packages folder, or file, there is a script defined in here called test, and basically it executes this line of code. So if you look here, you can see that line of code. So watch tells it is a flag, and it tells either Jasmine or Karma. I can never remember which one, but it tells that to watch to see if there's any changes and to rerun the test if there's any changes. I find it to be, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it's worth it having it. And then code coverage is a flag that tells it to create code coverage reports. And the code coverage reports are usually in a folder called coverage. They're not always, but typically they're, and then it usually has the name of your project. Again, not always. It just depends on how things are covered, or covered, configured. So anyways, I could drag this index file into a tab. Now, oddly enough, you can't drag it into the tab of the application. You'll get like a weird browser error, but you could drag it into the tab, and then you can click, and it will spawn another. Or for me, it spawns another tab, and then all that, and so now I could see like where my unit tests are what lines are covered and not covered. Now, I am not 100% sold on unit tests, and I'm definitely not 100% sold on 100% test coverage for sure. It's just something I wanted to try and see what happens. But I will say that, like, you probably should set aside some time in your development process to really, really analyze your code. I don't think it's feasible while you're trying to get things working to also be in the mindset of making the code as whatever you're trying, like efficient, readable, maintainable, whatever it is you're trying to do at the granular level. I think that, you know, when you're trying to get things working or you're trying to fix bugs or something, that you kind of just have to code and get it working and try different things and all that. And then probably you need to spend a bit of time sort of making sure that all the code that you wrote is actually being used. Like, I definitely do that, but the one thing that will slip under the radar will be like then going back and making sure that code is as efficient and as, you know, just like that every single line has been deeply analyzed before I move on. Well, unit test is actually a really good time to do that. If you know, like me, you don't really. It's something that is fairly easy to miss. But it looks like I have 3 functions that are uncalled, 8 lines that aren't called, and 7 branches that are not called. Now, the branches are by far the hardest, and 9 times out of 10 for me, it's easier to take a branch and convert it into a function than it is to actually set everything for the branch. So that's usually my tactic towards trying to get to 100% is doing that. I believe we were working on app layout because it was the one that was the least, and it actually was red over here, so we have already done a pretty good job. And I spent a lot of time on this set timeout and trying to kind of get away from using set timeout because it is quite emotionally taxing for people. And one of the things that I was sort of, when I was doing my analysis of this code last time, was this, and I'm just kind of remembering because that was yesterday morning, which feels like a month ago to me. And so this process visualization, it's probably be easier for me from a unit test perspective to pass that in. Because then if I pass that in, it makes this process visualization function easier to unit test. But for unit testing, life is just generally a lot easier if well, okay, so I am passing in the components, so I guess it shouldn't be that hard. I just need to mock native element and make sure that it has an offset width. So actually, I changed my mind because that is just part of this. So anyways, so without further ado, and I guess it'll be easier to get this finalize initialization tested. So what finalize initialization, this function does is it accepts the app layout component, which in my unit tests I already have one of these, and it returns a function. And basically all it does is return a function that sets after init complete of the actual thing to true. Now, at my job, like I've spent most of my career, the vast majority of my career I've spent as a front-end developer and mostly as a contractor. And generally my job has always been, for the most part, to get stuff working. That's my job, and that's what I'm really, really good at. generally nobody has ever cared what my opinion was about architectural matters. But at my current job, we have there's a huge focus on me specifically becoming much stronger from an architecture perspective. And it does bother me that I don't really understand what why I have after init complete. I'm guessing that the reason I built that was so that during animation and other processes, if they try to do something and the initialization hasn't been completed, so that means that the component itself has not been, its width and height has not been set yet. That not to do whatever it is supposed to do. That's what I think that was for. I feel like there's probably a better way to do that. To a better architectural way to sort of, instead of me just guessing what the heck this does, to be able to actually see what it's done. But you know, it is what it is at this moment. You know, hopefully at some point, oh gosh, I'm having the biggest problems. I think I'm gonna have to buy a new computer because my the HDMI connection to my computer, if you even touch it at all, it I lose my like my computer thinks that it's still connected, but the UI, the monitor doesn't show anything. And this doesn't happen on my work computer, so I'm guessing that there's that little connection there has gotten very weak, has gotten unstable. I could probably take it somewhere, and maybe for some money they could, solder it so that it's nice and solid again. But honestly, it's probably, I think I paid like $250 for this computer, so I could probably buy another one for the same amount and then have all the latest stuff again. I would have to set up everything again, but that's no big deal because almost everything I have is in Git, so I don't think it would be that big of a deal to move. But anyways, all right, so finalized initialization accepts a component and returns a function, and that function, I need to execute that function. So I'm going to go into I've always found this to be quite challenging, figuring out where a unit test is. Control copy. So what I'm going to do, there's a lot of ways to do it. You could look at this path and find it that way. Some architectures it's actually difficult to do that. I found the most reliable way is to come into here. You could find some sort of unique text, like this export class app layout component is probably going to be, the class name is probably going to be unique. Not always. Some places they'll have that. The selector would probably almost always be select. So you could probably search on this string and find this. And then for me, all the way the CLI does things, it actually creates the unit test in the same directory. That is not how it is everywhere. Or I could get this file name. And usually, in most places these days, I've definitely seen places where it's not true, but in most places, file names are, in fact, unique. Not always, but in most places. So I'm going to close my packages. Generally, yeah, let me close others. It's almost always a good rule of thumb for me whenever I open the packages to close everything else. So Control P, and then paste the name of the file you're looking for. You see I have two of them. I have one that's called the actual name, and then one that's called that with the spec. And the spec is the one. So spec stands for specification. And so this is our test. So what we want to do is come up with a good name. So it is how you say that it's a specification. You'll hear the word specification in multiple places. Specification is often used as a name for like a requirement. A lot of times if you're a BA or something, you'll call it a requirement specification. it should, and I guess what this thing is supposed to do is finalize initialization for the should. Is almost, for some reason it's just a standard. We always put should. Probably, like when I first started, it probably would have been shall. Should finalize. And they would say should in most specifications, or shall, and shall had a different meaning. Shall meant like it has to do it. Should means that it, try to do this. It's important that we do this, but it doesn't have to be done. And normally when they would do shall, they would say shall, and you put like a parentheses and 1 or 2, and every one of them would have their own numbers. So then you go back and you could test that all the shalls were met. So it should finalize initialization for the component. So I did get some very good news at work yesterday, but I don't want to jinx it, so I'm not going to say what it is yet, but I'm very excited. Things just change a lot. All right, so we have a component, so we can run const after init function. And this is probably, like, a lot of places don't really like you to have a lot of comments in your code. It just really depends on, like, the situation. But this, I've never seen any place that had a problem with you putting comments in this. So a lot in the unit tests, and the unit tests are often the best place to actually figure out exactly what the purpose of something is. Constant after init function, because it's a function, and equals, and our component, and they just happen to name components. That's just how they do it in the CLI. When they generate the CLI, they just name it up here component. That's just, you can name it whatever you want. Typically it's easiest if you name it component, but some places, the way they're set up, it might be easier and clearer to name it something else. Component, so it's a function on the component that returns a function that updates the component. So not the easiest language to understand, and it actually passes an instance of itself in there. And I had to do that because what happens is that the way the set timeout works, it loses its context. It doesn't know. It's running basically with no context. So I pass in the component itself. I also could have done a bind in this. I just thought that this was a little bit easier to understand. It's one of those things where it's very difficult to understand anything. Anyways, so this should help my coverage. It should also throw a warning saying that I have a specification that doesn't have any finalized initial component. So spec, this has no expectations. So it's upset that it doesn't have one of these specs in it. It actually looks like I did that up here too. So I probably got distracted, but okay, so if we hit reload now, what we should see is this screen, but this will be red. Yeah, and that's because this function never got called. And it looks like that function doesn't need anything. It got everything it needed when it got created. It got created with a reference to this component. When it got created, it knew what the component is because it got sort of minted out or generated. It was a factory that when it got generated, it had a reference to its own component, which is one of the most powerful things in coding and in JavaScript specifically. But it's also probably the main reason why JavaScript is so hard to keep from having memory leaks. because of these. This would be called a closure. So it has a reference to something even after, like even after if the component was destroyed, the component could not be destroyed because this still has a reference to it. So it's just one of those things that's very difficult to deal with. So now I can run that function. And then I think, so I don't know why. See, so it did not rerun the unit tests at that for some reason. So let's go ahead and rerun the unit tests. And we're waiting for them to be done. I see, I think these two non-dark blue green buttons or periods, dots. And so now we have this coverage. Our coverage has got a lot better. We're at like 100% of our functions in there are covered. Now we have two problems here. Okay, so we have two, not problems, but we have two things that do not have expectations. So let's create an expectation for this one. And what we expect is the component dot, what is it, initialized? After init complete. And we expect it to be equal to false, to equal false, fail, false. And then after this, we expect it to be true. And we have to do that timeout because see, actually, I don't even know. For some reason, I don't know why this doesn't work, to be honest with you, because I guess, okay, so we set the component's width and we set the component's height, but it isn't actually changed yet. It won't change until after the next render. So this set timeout of 0 basically puts it to the beginning of the next async cycle. So JavaScript runs in a loop, and at the end of every loop, it does a draw. It draws everything. It basically collects up all the little tasks it's supposed to do, and then it does it, and then it draws everything on the screen, and then only after that, and then it runs the next loop. Well, component viewer width and component view height, setting those things is only going to happen after the next draw. So whatever is weird wasn't working right before this was not working right because the actual width of the component and the actual height of the component wasn't actually changed yet. So we expect this to be true at this point. So we'll expect it to be false and then true. And it doesn't feel like this thing is running. Yes, we could tell for sure if we make this false. And I can't even tell you how many times I thought, see, I don't know. So we should have one fail. All right, see, it like compiled it. I don't think it ran it. Yeah, so we had our one failure. We expected true to equal false. This to equal this. So then we change this. And see, it's 8:32. Right. So now we're passing. We have all our coverage in here. Now we have another one that we did not. So we still have this one without an expectation. That should determine current ID. I think this is supposed to return a current whatever the ID is based on the URL. So like if you look over here, the ID is 12. So that's the job of this thing. So if we ever screw around with the URL or something, and we may find out that, hey, this get current visualization ID function will break, and that's a weird side effect, right? And it's not great that we're tied to that, and it'd be nice if we could use routing or something to determine it, but and I think we are using routing to determine it, but so what we expect the current ID to be is 1. And that's because there's a 1 there. Let's just make this 100 so we can actually test something that expect the to equal 100. Now some people would probably want to like set this as a variable component. Would probably want to set this to a variable and then sort of append it to the variable and then check against the variable. I could see that. I don't think it's particularly valuable. But alright, so we are not seeing it's definitely running. See, sometimes it runs it, sometimes it doesn't. I think we're done with all the warnings. Alright, so next is process visualization, which we will pass our component in. I do not know if it will have a native element. We might need to like have it wait a tick or something like that for the native element to exist. As you like, if you look at this, this is like, sometimes you really know what you're talking about. Sometimes you think you know what you're talking about. But sometimes when you look at these, you'll actually see, I don't know what, yeah, so I guess it took us there, as you see, like, there's this visualization that has been created. Basically that is the native element. So we'll see if, but I think we might have to wait a fraction of a second. I don't know what all the timing is in these unit tests. So it should process the visualization, which basically sets the viewer width and the viewer height of the component. So I'm just going to say, like, really honestly, like, my only goal is to get 100% coverage. If I learn something along the way or whatever, that's great, but 100% coverage is my focus. You can get caught up into all kinds of deep dives into stuff as part of doing this, but it should. Process the visualization. And then comma. And we're just going to say const. What does this return? This doesn't return anything, which I think is generally a mistake on my part. I think these things are a little easier to run, but let's just say component process visualization, and this thing gets its own component. Hit save. And hit reload, refresh. I don't know if it ran. I don't know if it ran or not. I don't think it ran. I guess it would be good to make this small enough here. Although nothing happens in real time. Okay, so it did not seem to actually write it. So the editor view didn't. What is editor view? Okay, so that is my view editor ref. So so the editor view doesn't exist yet. So that leaves us in one or two options, and generally this first option is the better option, and that's like to mock out a component and give it a native element and just sort of do that. The other option is to like have it wait a second and see if it does it there. So I'm going to. So whenever I pass this function in this way, it will actually, ChatGPT will typically tell me that there's a problem with the I there and all that. So I'm actually going to go find the function itself. Okay. ChatGPT. So let's just think of the words, and this is probably my favorite part about using ChatGPT, is trying to come up with the right words. So the thing is the editor view is actually what's known as a view child, and viewer is the template resource variable. I think it's what it's called, template variable, and it doesn't exist yet. It's undefined when in our unit tests when we get here. And the problem is that it's happening as part of an effect, and so so that's going to be a problem. It's our effect. We would have to like trigger our effect somehow, and I don't think like effect is sort of a new thing, and I don't think that there's really good ways to do that. So I do think we're going to have to mock this component. We aren't going to be able to use our actual component. So I am trying to unit test this Angular function. Okay, so it's so funny because it really trips it up that I'm doing it this way. Okay, so finalize init. So this is the finalize initialization. All right, so I want my unit test. Why? I just want to unit test it. I just want to unit test process visualization. Yeah, see, here's where we're basically we're mocking the component. So we need this. Okay, so so in here we're going to say it should finalize. Keep forgetting to put my semicolons in, so I'm going to do that now. Should finalize this, the visualization. It should process the visualization. And so I know we need a fake component. I think this is all I was looking for, was this fake component. I don't know what this is though, why. Yeah, I don't. Oh, because it has to have its own thing. It's not assignable to type boolean. So I think after init complete. So it's upset that this function doesn't exist, that this isn't a function. I think all we can do, I think we can do this. Function. Okay, I guess maybe I'm wrong. Okay, I am definitely wrong. Well, I wonder, okay, let's do this. Does it provide a fix? Okay, that's weird. Okay, so I'm seeing this error. Okay. So in my mock component, I'm seeing this error for after init complete. Oh my gosh. This is such a pain in the butt. Oh, I wonder if I can do this false. If I can just say true or false or something. No. Let's see. Definitely want to understand what's going on here. Control copy. Control V. Okay. Okay, so that didn't work either. I did try this. Oh. So I did try that, and I think I get false. Okay, so now I wonder if I can just say as, so basically it's complaining that this doesn't have all of the things that app component is supposed to. I think I might have to say as undefined, or as, yeah, undefined. Okay. can I do this? Well, it's weird. Okay, so let's say const component colon, and we're going to say this is an app component, and then as undefined. Now what is the problem? Oh, unknown, not undefined. So many little things. So many little things. Okay, so now I've basically forced it to be that. It's like, hey, just do your job. Don't worry about it. You're overthinking this. That's what I'm telling. All right, so now I think, now that I have a component, I believe I can just call it with my new component. And that has its own native width. So, so it doesn't, component, okay, so, oh, who knows if this is going to work. I don't think it'll work because I think I need to add a viewer with. Colon 0 and a viewer height. Colon 0. Because when it tries to do this assignment, it would have nothing to assign it to without if it doesn't have that. So I don't know if that makes sense, but basically it takes the element that's inside of there and it matches up the components with the component's height. And these are just, I believe these are just variables that I have. So now let's see if I can run this thing. Component. Oh. I think I should name it mock component. This is very heady, weird, mind-blowing kind of stuff because this component is has a function called process visualization. I'm going to pass it a different component, and then it's going to update. Oh, okay, so I didn't need these because the actual real component has one of those. Okay, so this is my component. This is the component that the unit test instantiated, created a version of, and I'm passing it a component, and I'm passing it mock component. So I'm passing it a different component. It's going to get stuff out of it, and then it's going to assign those values to itself. So let's just see if that even works. Do you even work, bro? Okay, so it did work. We have 100 unit tests now, and we have 100% unit tests. And so what we expect is, I don't know, what is the, let's come in here. What is, okay, so these are set to 0 to begin with, so let's just go ahead and do that. See this little backwards button here. I used to use keystrokes. I can't even remember what the keystrokes were, but I use this go back because Visual Studio also has the same button. So it's just a good habit. Or it's a consistent habit. I don't know if it's good or not. But so what we do is we expect the component, so that's the real component, offset width, or what is it? Viewer width, okay, viewer height to equal 0. And then after this runs, expect viewer height to equal whatever viewer height offset height there, 100. That's funny that it's saying that it. So it's saying that this ended up being expected 0. I think it's not happy with that one. Viewer height is in fact the, yeah. That is weird. Let's see, we're back up to everything passing. I don't know why that didn't work. So our component, oh, because it uses its own component, right? Component, process, visualization, mock component. And we passed in the component. Oh, okay, it has its own component. It only updated this one, so we wanted, so I guess mock component would actually test it. I mean, yeah, that doesn't really prove anything, but, oh, well, stupid, silly. That's not the right one. This would be mock, but that doesn't prove anything. I don't know, so I'm just going to say it only updates the actual mock component. It doesn't, it only updates the component itself, which is what we want, but, and I'm just not even going to worry about trying to figure out how to do that, because, you know, like, we could spend all day trying to figure out that, and it's just not worth it. Alright, so where are we? Okay, so we are perfect in here now. So let me hit back. We're done with that one. Let's go to all. We're back to the index. Reload. So I don't know what we should do next week. I mean, I'm done today. I can't do any more today. I'm out of time. But it looks like we are good on functions, though. Every function is. We've got like a couple of branches. So for tomorrow, I guess we'll start from the top to the bottom, since none of these are a little more demanding than others. So basically, come in here, and we have this, and this is a perfect example of like something that is just so much easier to run if this is a function instead of just like logic that's just hanging around in here in this effect. It's just super simple to unit test. And then, so that's probably the next thing. And actually, I think this could very well be the reason. Like, this behavior might be the reason why we're getting those extra rows, those detached rows. It might be better to actually take my ST renderers and like delete all the values in there, because I think what that would do is like do like a for each or something like that, instead of actually creating a whole new array. Take the existing array and update it to have nothing in it, and that might actually fix those extra rows that show up from time to time. This might be like the underlying reason that those. Now you do this typically because you want to trigger the redraw, but because it's hard for JavaScript to determine when something has changed. It can tell when an array has been replaced, but it can't really tell when an array has been modified, because the address of the array stays the same. So, you know, anyways, happy coding, everybody. Have a wonderful day. It's Friday. Bye.